Thanks a lot, Jim. We love you guys.
Thanks, Jim. I'm Cleo Devlin. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Jim, so much for inviting us to be a part of this. It's an honor to get a chance to be a part of something like this with some wonderful speakers carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you, Mildred and Anne and Marty, for your time and message. We'll put the info for our, we have a 6 p.m. East Coast time, Breaking Down the Big Book Zoom meeting Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. And we'll put the info in the group chat if anyone's interested in joining us. We'd love to have you. So I'm going to talk to you about the fourth step for about 20 minutes, and then I'm going to hand it over to my husband, Jack, and he's going to talk about the fourth step for the rest of the time and hopefully cover anything that I might have missed.
We're totally married.
So in order for me to talk about any step, especially a step like the fourth step where there's a lot of writing involved, it's important for me to go back and touch on the first step, because the willingness for me to take action in any of these steps is born of the reality of my first step experience. If I got to Alcoholics Anonymous in February of 2013, but my sobriety date is May 10th of 2016, and I never left meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous in those first 3+ years. I just did not understand my alcoholism. I hadn't had a real honest experience with the first step, and therefore I wasn't willing to work the steps in their entirety because I didn't understand that my life was on the line, and that I was going to die if I didn't. And the reality of my first step, it looks like I'm powerless over alcohol, not only when alcohol is in my system, but also that I'm powerless over alcohol when there's absolutely no alcohol in my system at all. And that I have this mind that without a power greater than myself is going to take me back to the first drink every single time, whether I want to or not, whether I know everything there is to know about alcoholism or not, whether I can remember the pain of what my drinking was for me and others. None of that is going to be enough to keep me sober. That nothing within my power is enough to keep me sober. And then the second half of the first step, that my life has become unmanageable, what I really didn't understand for those first 3 years, 3+ years that I wasn't able to stay sober, is that doesn't change when I stop drinking. Alcohol was one thing that, it didn't allow me to manage my life, but it made my life internally feel a lot more manageable to me. And all of a sudden, when I put the alcohol down, my life becomes a lot more unmanageable. And I didn't understand that this unmanageability that's talked about in the big book, this unmanageability that's talked about in the second half of the first step, is not an external condition. It has nothing to do with having a job or a husband or a house or a car. The unmanageability in the second half of the first step is an internal condition that is created out of my efforts to run my life on self-will. And until I understood that, and not just understood it intellectually, but understood it to the core of my being after trying time after time to, put the drink down and run my life on my own by trying to be a better person, by trying to operate on these moral convictions and failing. Not until I understood that in my heart, from painful experience with it, was I willing to work all of these steps in their entirety. Um, and so, after Marty just talked about the third step, and the third step decision, and I love the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there's a bunch of awesome stuff here. And I like to stick to as close to the text as possible when talking about any of these steps, and especially the directions for them. Because I also have experience with being told to do. I actually, like a few months ago, I found something that I had done, which I had been directed to do by someone, as a fourth step, which wasn't a fourth step out of this big book. It was a life story that I had written, from the time I was born until current. And I found that a couple months ago, and I didn't stay sober after doing that. And the problem with that, with doing something like that, is primarily the problem is it's not in the big book, and the program in the big book is the thing that have allowed hopeless alcoholics like me to recover from alcoholism, and nothing else has been proven to do that. But the other problem with doing that is, if I'm writing my life story, I'm writing the story from my perspective as told by me. I'm not looking for anything new. If I'm writing a story, I'm, regurgitating my memories from my perspective out of my mind. And that we have already learned that the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. Which is why, I've come to see and experience this fourth step, not as an intellectual exercise, but as a prayerful exercise. And there has to be some God involved, a lot of God involved, because I'm trying to get at some things that I'm not able to get at on my own. So it cannot be an exercise by me and my mind. So going to the top of page 64, it says, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, talking about the third step decision, and the third step being this vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. So this third steps decision is not going to have any lasting effect unless right away we launch from this decision into a strenuous effort. So it's telling us this is not going to be easy. We're going to have to do some hard work to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. And I looked up the definition of blocking, or block, in the dictionary we have that's from 1937, to try to help us get more at what the definition of these words were to Bill and the people that were putting this book together at the time that they were doing that. And the definition of block is obstruct so as to prevent passage or progress. So I have these things that are preventing me from getting past them or progressing. And it tells us our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. So, our liquor's just a symptom. These things that we're trying to get at in the fourth step are the causes and conditions of why I need a drink, of why I'm powerless over alcohol from a sober state. These causes and conditions are how I live my life. the ideas that I'm running my life on, the ideas that I'm trying to manage my life on the basis of. Um, and they're blocking me from God and from my fellows. And I need to get unblocked in order to be able to live. Because when I get here, I'm not living and I'm completely blocked and I'm completely delusional and I'm unable to see my delusion, because that is the very nature of delusion, that when you're in it, you're unable to see that you're in it. Um, and so, just to get into a little bit of what we look at in inventory, um, so, first it tells us being convinced, a little further down the same page, being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestations. So we're already supposed to be convinced that self, not alcohol, self is what had defeated us. Um, and then I start to look at the common manifestations of self, and resentment is the number one offender. Um, and resentment, the way that it's been explained to me, that is the most meaningful to me, is if you break down the word into the roots of the word re and then sentiment, re being this like again, or like doing something again, and the sentiment being like the same root as sentiment or feeling. And so resentment being these stories I play over and over in my head. And these, the things that people did to me, uh, that I constantly am playing over and over and like wanting that to have gone differently. Um, and that's pretty much what most of my thoughts are when I get here. Um, it tells us resentment destroys more alcoholics than anything else. So resentment destroys more alcoholics than alcohol. That's a pretty strong statement. Um, and so, we take a look at resentment. And I'm gonna, as I talk about this, I'm gonna talk about columns, because this is the way that I read it. Like I said before, I think that this is it's really important that the mechanics of this and the columns and where things are supposed to go don't become more important than getting to the truth of what is blocking us. So, I don't think that there's a hard and fast way that these columns need to be lined out. I do think that everything that it tells us we need to look at needs to be covered. Um, and so, it tells us in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. And, from this point on in the book, starting at step 3, it's like the book's very clear. It tells us, like, it told us further up in the page, this was step 4, and then it tells us what to do. So we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. So that's my first column, a list of people, institutions, or principles with whom I'm angry. We asked ourselves why we are angry. That's the second column. In this example on page 65, that is called the cause, but the things that I think he did, because as we see, a lot of these things aren't even things that the person actually did, but they're things I think that he did, that I am saying are the reason for my resentment. And then it tells us in most cases, we found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. So that's column 3, and it's these things that I just listed are, plus a couple more, but there's these 7 areas of self that we look at, in this third column of what was what do I think was affected? Was it my self-esteem? The way that the way that I see myself? Was it my pocketbook, financial, my ambitions, the way I want things to go, my personal relationships, my sex relationships, my security, or the things I depend on or think I need in order to be okay. And then the seventh one, we find it later down the page in this example, my pride. And so, this is all still, these first three columns is all the delusion that I'm living in when I get here. This is all the ways that I think, the way that I feel, and the way that I drink is everybody's fault but my own. And for the first time, because of the pain that living my life on my own self will without any power that I can plug into that allows me to change, even when I want to change, from the pain of, just running my life into the ground time and time again, I'm finally willing to look at this from a different angle. And so if we turn the page onto 66, at the bottom of the page, tells us after we do these three columns, we turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the state that it's referring to is, being dominated by the world and its people, or, in other words, everything outside of myself. This state of believing that my happiness is up to anybody else or anything outside of me. The wrongdoing in that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. And I love that line because it makes so clear that the thing that has the power to kill us has nothing to do with any of the things that we believe other people have done to us. Because it just told us the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real. So whether a fancy is, like a fantasy, it's something that we think, these things I tell myself of, oh, that person said that because they were thinking this, and, this stuff that I have no evidence for, these stories I make up, that has the power to actually kill. So it's not the things that other people are doing, that I believe other people are doing to me, that has the power to actually kill me. It's my own mind. It's how my mind grabs these things and creates a story around them. And then I take that story into my life and into my relationships with other people. And it colors my whole life and it blocks me. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. And so, that line is everything. We're not going to look at this stuff and then decide that we're going to be different. I've decided I was going to be different, many, many times, and it never worked. So we then, have this beautiful prayer on the top of 67 that we use in this inventory that we say for each person before we turn to column 4. And each of these, there's 3 inventories that we look at. Hopefully Jack can touch on the other 2 because I'm taking longer than I thought I would to talk about this. But, all of these, it's like, okay, I put myself down on paper and then I have this turning to God to ask for help and power to see something from a different angle. And so then we have instructions for the 4th column. And it tells us putting out of our minds, this is in the middle of 67, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. So that's what the 4th column is going to be. It's going to be my mistakes, my faults, something that's often, talked about in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that's actually nowhere in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and not part of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is this idea of my part. It doesn't say my part. The last column is not my part. It says we're looking for our own mistakes. We put out of our mind the wrongs that other people have done, and this idea of my part implies that the other person had a part in the matter. So that is not what we're looking for in this last column. We're looking for our mistakes, and it has these guiding questions for these mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? And for me, I ask each of these things as a guiding question in my fourth column, and it turns out that in pretty much every case, I'm selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. The selfishness is these thoughts that put my own well-being and my own feelings and my own desires above that of everybody else's. The roles that I assign myself that allow me to justify my behavior. I use this one of the most selfish things that I uncover in inventory is that I have this victim card that I pull of, oh, bad things have happened to me. I've been abused, therefore I'm owed something. I have the right to treat others poorly or to try to get something out of you because I'm owed something because I've been treated poorly. Dishonesty, there's a few different ways that dishonesty shows up. There's typical cash register dishonesty that, is pretty obvious. We lie, we steal. But the things that for me are really important to look at, are delusion. The lies that I'm living my life on the basis of, that I'm believing, that I'm accepting as truth. Back in the third step material, it talks about on 61, a little bit below the middle of the page, is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? And I'm pretty much a victim of that delusion in every single thing that shows up in my resentment inventory, because I go into relationships thinking that if I treat someone a certain way, that they're going to treat me a certain way in return. And I'm just trying to manage people and manage relationships. Some other forms of dishonesty that are important to look at is omission, leaving out some important piece of information. Hypocrisy for me too. Have I done this same thing that I'm resentful at somebody else for doing to me, to somebody else? And almost 100% of the time, the answer is yes. And if the answer is no, I know that I am capable of doing that same thing. And then, next question, self-seeking. These are the actions I take on the basis of my selfish thoughts, the actions I take to try to bring about my selfish goals. And frightened, always, yes, I'm always afraid. And my fears usually show up as a couple of the same things over and over again. I'm afraid of being inadequate. I'm afraid of being abandoned. I'm afraid of being judged. I'm afraid of not being liked. And we get to carry these fears that we look at here into our next inventory. And I'll just touch on one fear for me that shows up time and time again, and that I've, gotten to some clarity on the destructiveness of it and what living from the basis of my mind looks like with this fear. And that's, the fear of not being lovable. All I want is to be accepted and loved as I am. But I'm so afraid that you won't love me and accept me as I am, that I show you some version of myself that isn't the real me. Because then if you don't accept me, you're not rejecting the real me. You're rejecting the version of me that I let you see. But the problem is, I have now used my mind to put myself in a position where I am completely blocked from any chance of real intimacy and vulnerability with anyone because I have refused to show you who I really am. And all I want is to be loved for who I really am. But I have put myself in a position where that is impossible. Um, and this work has completely changed my life. That is not my truth today. You know, I'm able to be vulnerable with other people. I'm able to sit here and talk to you guys about these things that have blocked me and still continue to block me, and I have to continue to look at and ask God for help with. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jack. Thank you all.
Incredible job. Incredible job.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jack Devlin, and I'm an alcoholic. And that was incredible. I'm a very fortunate man because that's my wife. So that's pretty awesome. I first want to echo exactly how Cleo started, and I just want to say thank you, Jim, for putting this on. And thanks for being reconnected. It's great to be connected even amongst this time, man. And thanks to everybody that went before us. So Mildred, really awesome to hear her. I believe I heard her in Philadelphia one time in a couple different places. And Anne, more about alcoholism, getting close to the truth in that chapter in my experience, getting close to those words in my heart, having an experience where I am Jim, I am the jaywalker. I know alcoholism coming through that chapter, and then into We Agnostics. That was incredible. And Marty, it's been so fun having you on every day at 6 o'clock on our meeting. And it was great to hear you today. And thanks a lot, everybody. So Cleo did an incredible job. And, where she left off is kind of where I'll pick up as best I can. I think one of the biggest things that we've already touched on, through her is why am I writing inventory? Why am I writing an inventory? I was a guy that came to Alcoholics Anonymous for years, and I would just parrot things. I would just repeat things. I would just say stuff, I knew the steps were cool. I knew you had to do them. I knew that it was like we were in a 12-step deal. But in my heart, why am I writing an inventory? And she nailed it, because I got to get unblocked from what, and again, why? I have to get unblocked from the only power that if I've truly had an effective experience in step one, the only power that's going to provide any type of freedom or relief from my condition, the only power that has a shot at all, at being able to solve my problem. Because clearly, the only reason why I'm hanging out with all you guys and why I've showed up in Alcoholics Anonymous and now have left against my own willpower at 2 years sober and have now come back is because I cannot solve my own problem. I cannot unblock myself from power. And the power that I'm running on, my life run on self, will hardly be a success is a really nice way to put it. It's more like you're probably going to end up federally indicted, Jack, and you're going to be considering suicide on a regular basis. And it'd be interesting how, some analogies can be a little more true later on in life than you would ever know. And, the reality for me is without getting unblocked, I'm a dead man. I'm a dead man. And there's this line right before we get into inventory that talks about, so our troubles we think are basically of our own making. And there's a guy that has had a big impact on the men that have saved my life. And he talked about the fact that if I'm going to be free, then the problem has to be me, period. That if I'm going to get free, I'm going to have to look at the fact that I am the one that has caused this bondage. I am the one that has caused these problems. The problem is not column 2. You know what I mean? It looks like it at first, but we got to get to what have I done? What's really going on? And what a gift. But usually when I'm approaching an honest inventory, I'm not coming from a place where I'm looking at it as a gift. I'm coming begging, I'm coming pleading, I'm coming begrudgingly. I'm not necessarily coming where I really just really stoked to write a resentment inventory, Come on, Dane, crush me again. Let's look at how the root of all my troubles is this beautiful mind that I love to revel in so often. And Cleo did a great job with the resentment inventory and moved into fear. And there was a lot of freedom for me in the fourth column of that resentment inventory. There's still a lot of work to be done, but a lot has happened in the falling away, the literal vanishment of years and months and weeks of bondage and of anger and of resentment and of just being convinced that I knew that something was off, and looking at, being willing to have God allow me to look at this list from an entirely different angle, being willing to allow this prayer to enter into my heart and then to come somehow through me with the help of a recovered alcoholic to show me the reality of what's really going on. What's the truth of my life? What's really happening here? Because these people are just out to screw Jack. There's no way, man. I'm not that important, no matter how important I think. I know that. There's a part of me that understands that, but I can't see the truth because of the delusion that Cleo talked about. And the same thing happened to me in the fear inventory, and the same thing happened to me in the resentment. I mean, in the conduct inventory, which this time became a relationship inventory, which this time has been used, this last inventory, this conduct inventory, as a way to get really, really clear on some information before I do what I'm admitting throughout the 4-step in the big book that I'm willing to do, which is to make these things right. That's where it first talks about it, is in these pages, that I'm willing to make these matters right. So that conduct inventory, you want to talk about coming prepared for an amends. Let's write, 7, 9, however many columns it is. Don't come at me in the chat about how many columns of conduct inventory is. I apologize but however many columns you write, you answer all those questions in that paragraph, and you come to an amends, and the ways I've been selfish, the ways I've been inconsiderate, how have I been dishonest? What have I done? Who else has been involved? Maybe my impact on you isn't just about me and you. Maybe there's a ripple effect that's gone way out. Maybe I'm going to sit with you eventually and if I get the gift, the ability to make amends to you. And maybe I'm going to be able to have some bit of an idea of possibly that this went way farther out, that my level of selfishness and dishonesty and inconsideration has placed you in a position to have your own relationships far removed from me get affected in a way that I would have had no idea about if I had never been taken through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, if I had never been shown what this one paragraph tucked on this one page after 68 says. I took Cleo's parents through this inventory before we flew back from the last time that I went through the steps to make amends to them. And thank God I did, because I was able to bring something to them. It was way more meaningful. And I'm not saying that the however many amends I've made, I've written conduct inventory on every single one of them. But through the lens of doing that for a lot of the beginning, starting to look at this paragraph as a way to really move forward, as a way to really be able to bring some more depth, has been incredible, and it also, there's so much spirit underneath so much of this. I loved how Cleo talked about that, that the mechanics of this are wonderful and they're great. And thank God they wrote directions somewhere, because, who knows where we'd be or what I'd be doing or what I'd be talking about, but especially looking in some of the words in that fear inventory, when you get into those couple paragraphs, and we're talking about being on a different basis, a different underlying principle for my entire life, for everything. What does that mean? I don't know what that looks like when I come. What are you talking about? Does that mean sober? Because that's all I got when I get here. That's a pretty different basis. But now we're talking about, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. Again, going back to that 3rd step stuff and going back to step 1, because it didn't work. Because I was dying. And my story, sober, 6 years, sacrificing principles, dying a spiritual and emotional death every day for years, running my own life, building the outside of my life to a place that I had never seen, that I never knew a little kid from Baltimore would ever be able to even indulge in anything like that. I mean, and I thought I'd made it. This is it. Here we go. And the complete, this finite belief system, this totally flawed level of dishonesty that is fueling me to make decisions that are based in fear, that cause me to cause more fear in myself and in others, that roll me into a way of living that is total misery. But on the outside, it's just got a smile and nod, Jack, smile and nod, Jack. You're just here to sell, 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 sell. And there was no new basis. There was no the last piece of this paragraph. We are in the world to play the role he assigns. He assigns. What's that look like right now? What's that look like right now? And that idea, these words can provide so much freedom when we can just take a little bit of time to get quiet with what that could possibly mean. Uh, just to the extent as we do as we think he would have us, and humbly rely on him to see enable us to match calamity with serenity, to finally get free, to be able to finally have some level of calm, some level of peace. What a gift, but I don't have the power to do it. Again, it's like, you can find that in almost every paragraph somewhere where we're in here. It's just back to this idea. Jack, you can't do that, man. He's going to enable you to do this. He, she, it, he, God, the power, capital P power that pulls us back from the gates of death is going to actually actualize this, for this to become realized. Man, to have the opportunity to finally be able to get free, even just a little bit, man. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. Again, what does that look like right now? And I'm really, really fortunate to have a really clear idea of some incredible stuff that's happened just in the last few weeks, few days, just sitting here in this moment, listening to that woman share that message, watching this power be demonstrated. That's incredible, to be awake enough, to be alive enough, to feel that, to know that, and to experience it myself. What a absolute gift. But we're talking about demonstration, and it's not always this wonderful, stars are shooting from the clouds. It's not all this incredible, beautiful thing. Cleo and I went through one of the most insanely terrifying periods of our lives not that long ago. And we had to walk through a terrifying time with some powers that are way greater than us, that we had no idea what was going to happen to our life. And this is exactly what she showed me how to do. I watched her demonstrate God's power, and in turn, I was able to demonstrate it too. I watched the truth flow through another person, and it was able to enter me, and we were able to walk with dignity and with integrity and with power through the fact that our entire lives were about to change as a result of the direct amends process, and we had no idea what to do. And we were showing through recovered people in this program, through the power of God and through these pages, exactly what to do. It was very clear. And Dane took me right here very often when I called, flipping out. Dane, I don't know. What do you mean? Oh my God, you're never even going to, and here we go, right back here, man. What do you think God would have you do? Because we're getting down to that little prayer. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention at what he would have us be. Jackie wants you to be a man of faith. What's that mean? We're letting him demonstrate through us. What's that look like? I mean, this is so powerful. And I can tell you one thing, that the next sentence or two were very true for me in this book, where it talks about an overhauling. An overhauling was something that I needed for many years sober, and that I was not willing to undergo. Just my experience. I talked about it. I asked different people to sponsor me for it. I talked to different meetings about it. I listened to different workshops for it. But I wasn't actually willing. I hadn't been brought to a place where I was willing to come back to this process on my knees and ask from a place of honesty to actually be changed, to actually allow an overhauling to take place. What are we talking about? We're talking about excavators, dump trucks. We're talking about an overhauling. We're taking the whole foundation out. We're building a whole new structure. We're doing, this is going to be a complete change. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for a long time. And what happened was a series of events happened between, Cleo and I. That series was me. And eventually I was brought to a place of willingness through her honesty with me about my life. She told me the truth. She told me the level of dishonesty that I was living with in a very loving and honest way because I told her to. She basically asked if I wanted to hear some real truth in a conversation that was very intuitively guided. And she was able to deliver me a piece of information in a couple areas of my life that I had been so terrified to face for years. And and the power of God spoke right through her directly into my heart. And and 2 weeks later, I was on a plane with a written inventory, and I was showing up. And this area of my life, um, there's a part on 70 where it talks about that. If our conduct continues, it's pretty likely that I might drink again. And I will just say this, that there's a lot of grace to do with the fact that I never drank again. That's a fact. Because my conduct was selfish and harmful and self-seeking and dishonest for years. And the reality for me is that until I was truly willing to make these things right, it says on 70, it says, we have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. And I can tell you that I had written probably 6 conduct inventories before this in 6 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I had never been willing to straighten out the past if we can. And you know how I know that I was willing this time to straighten out the past that I can is because for the last year and a half, I've been involved in an amends process that I had no idea was even real or available to someone like me. The willingness was shown by the action. As my sponsor says, willingness sounds like on the front door of every single person that's willing to hear the amends. Incredible stuff. It talks about prayer. It talks about being tolerance and patience and goodwill toward all men. I really thought for a long time there was no, my experience in just writing was always compounded in 5 and moving through the rest of the steps. I got a phone call yesterday from a guy that I started working with 2 weeks ago over the phone, and he's writing his 4th column right now. And he called me yesterday and he goes, Jack, I don't know what's going on, man. He goes, I'm writing my 4th column. I'm saying this prayer. I'm writing this 4th column. I'm sitting here and I'm watching resentments leave. I'm watching a power that I can't define, that I don't know. Take them off the paper. They are no longer real. I am watching them slip away right in front of my eyes. What's going on? I'm looking at the truth for the first time. It's such a powerful phone call, and just writing and just doing what it says, coming from a place of honesty. And I got 1 minute, and I'm going to say what it says on page 71. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. And because the reality is that if he can't, who's going to? I need God's help. And that's exactly what has happened. And my life has been forever transformed through a man that was willing to tell me the truth, and a man that was willing to give me the directions as they were given to him. And I am forever indebted to Alcoholics Anonymous, the fellowship, and to Alcoholics Anonymous, the book, and to good sponsorship, and to the power of a God that there's not enough time to honor, that there's not enough time to talk about what has been done. That man that showed up with that inventory is now a married, committed man that knows on the basis of true power he can show up with integrity and love a woman who deserves nothing less than that. And thank you, Alcoholics Anonymous, and thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us here today. And thank you again, Jim, for letting us be with you.